turn the television on to mute.
I was
I'm
just
watching.
watching. I was just watching The Great Santini. You remember that movie?
Oh my God, Robert Duvall. I could relate to that one just a little bit. My dad wasn't quite that psycho, but he was on the way to it.
Was he in the military?
No, I had two brothers in the military. Dad was a preacher.
No kidding. What kind of preaching did he do? Was it like
Uh,
Pentecostal stuff?
he was Cumberland Presbyterian, which is sort of Presbyterianism for rednecks, and um, he was the kind of, I'm this way too. I'm a performer. He was a performer, and he was born in Arkansas in 1918. And the only way you could get performing satisfaction was to be a preacher. There wasn't exactly any traveling vaudeville in Arkansas back then. So he became a preacher, and he was that type of person that craves the intimacy you only get from strangers. And he would be a hoot at church, slapping his leg, funny guy, and then he'd come home and sit in his recliner and not say a word for 6 friggin' days.
What do you think that is? Like I'm cut from a similar cloth, not so much on the divine, the religious part, but there is that kind of that wanting to get through to a total stranger, and you're going to do the tap dance, and you're going to do the somersaults, or in your case, you're going to perform. Where does that come from? Or is that just something for the couch of a strength?
I think it comes from, I think it comes from your family, really, or people, I don't know where the desire to be noticed starts. It's been shown that performers are generally the babies of the family, and they get the attention, and they stay the baby, so they get more attention than any of the other kids ever got. And when that attention starts to wane, they got to find it in some other way, and that leads to the stage. I think that's what happened with me.
Were you from Arkansas originally as well, or were you a Tennessee guy?
Now, I was born in Kentucky. Like most preachers, Dad traveled around from church to church over time, and he preached in Arkansas. This before I was born. He preached in Arkansas, then moved to Oklahoma, then moved to Texas, then wound up in Tennessee preaching 2 churches at the same time. And my older brother and sister were born in Tennessee. I got another much older brother that was born in Arkansas before them. And then Dad moved to a church in Kentucky, and that's where I was born. And I was raised in Kentucky. I lived in Kentucky till I was 29, and then moved to Nashville then.
Was music, was it just religious music that was heard around the house, or were you listening to everything? I know that you probably were, in your siblings, but do you remember if your parents went dancing, or did they do stuff like that?
Oh no. Mom and Dad didn't have many social occasions at all. There was a lot of religious music in the house. We had a stereo system. We had Elvis's How Great Thou Art gospel record, which is a great record. We had the best of Eddie Arnold. We had these Reader's Digest compilations, like 4 discs by the Living Strings, and for some reason, we had the Monkees too. We had the first 2 Monkees records. We had one of the Happy Goodmans records because we knew them. And for some ungodly reason, I don't understand why, but we had practically every Boots Randolph record. ever made. I swear to God, I've never figured out where that came from. Then one day I come home and Dad's bought a bagpipes record of all things. Because, I don't care who you are. I mean, the Scottish must be the only people that understand the appeal of a bagpipe. But Dad, the Royal Dragoons was what they were called. And let's see, we had Alvin and the Chipmunks records. Mm, uh,
That's
and that's
hilarious.
about it.
But no, but when you started, one of the things that I find fascinating is because Nashville now is a very sophisticated place in terms of the people that I know who have moved down there. They've added, you got a lot of people from Los Angeles, Chicago, New York, and everything. But when you went there, and there's been people going to Nashville for music and to record for since it started, but the town is a lot cooler now. When you first got there, there must have been just like a small little gaggle of cool people surrounded by mainstream country music. Was that a difficult?
Well, it's still that way.
It is.
So far as the small group of people in the Music Row monolith. When I moved to Nashville, I moved in 92 down here with my fiance because she got a job down here. So I was finally able to go to Nashville and seek my fortune. And we were just getting to be a hip town then. Garth Brooks had happened. And so all these, and Jason and the Scorchers had happened. And so we had aspiring country singers getting breaks because the record companies had so much money coming in from Garth, not just his own label, but other labels too, because they're the heads of the labels in either New York or LA figured there was gold in them Nar Hills because Garth was so big. So you saw a lot of country singers get signed, and there was quite the rock scene from the early 80s through the early 90s. And Jason and the Scorchers had gotten big. Walk the West had gotten big. Royal Court of China was on the way to getting big. Webb Wilder was big for a little bit. And so they were looking, you had record companies looking for the new rock talent in town as well. So that was going on. But it was still an overgrown small town and still is. There's, well over 1 million people living in Nashville proper now, but the Americana scene, the singer-songwriter scene is actually a small town in and of its own. We all know each other. We don't necessarily know the A&R guys on 16th Avenue, but we know each other, all the people in East Nashville and Madison and other little areas on the west side of the river. We all know each other. It's not that big a community, really. And one of the cool things about it is, there's session musicians that run in that crowd for alternative sessions that they play. There's lots of singer-songwriters. And lots of people to go on the road with bands. You got all the high class musicians, you got all the singer songwriters who are sometimes high class musicians. Sometimes they just kind of strum and do their songs. And a thing about Nashville you don't find in the other towns and music scenes in the other towns is that it doesn't matter how great you sing or how great you play, because everybody does that. Everybody plays great and sings great. What matters is, can I put up with you, either in a band or on the road or during an all-day session? Are you easy to get along with? What we call it being a good hang. And by virtue of that, everybody's nice. And you know, and also there's not a lot of money to be made in the scene that we're in, so nobody's crawling over each other to get that brass ring. And so there's no backbiting practically at all, and everybody's very supportive of each other. I have so many friends in this scene that I get a lump in my throat sometimes about it. Wonderful people, beautiful people.
Have they been there? They've probably been there since you've been having health issues, and you'd written about going through chemo and or discussed that. I'm sure you know who your real friends are these days.
Oh, I had a car wreck in 2015, and I was on the way to a gig, and I pulled out in front of a truck where I thought it was a four-way stop, and it was not. It was a two-way stop, and this truck broadsided me, shattered my pelvis. I was in a wheelchair for a month and on crutches for a couple of months after that. And before I even got home from the wreck, there was a GoFundMe started for me that eventually raised something like $12,000. And then the Music City Roots TV program did a benefit for me and raised another like $11,000 or $12,000. So if you look at it that way, the wreck was a complete success. And yeah, I found out who my friends are, and there were a lot of them. And I made a post on Facebook one day, not long afterwards, because my wife Beth was having to wait on me hand and foot. I couldn't get up and do anything for myself. So she was bringing me all my beverages, all my meals. I was sitting in a chair in the living room, and I posted on Facebook, hey, my wife's waiting on me hand and foot. I think she needs a good glass of Merlot right now. And within 24 hours, there was 4 bottles of Merlot brought over to the house. So I never felt so loved in my life as when that happened. And all that, I healed up and everything by 2016. Then in 2017, I came down with bladder cancer. And all these people came out of the woodwork again, loving on me. And it is heartwarming, you know. I've been broke all my life, Steve, but when it comes to friends, I'm a millionaire. I'm very.
I'm right with you, my friend. I really think that when we're gone, and look, we'd all like to make we'd all like to have a significant payday and have some kind of brass ring. However, it's what people are going to say about you when you're gone. I think you really have to make an effort. And when I say you, everybody, I got a 10-year-old daughter. Say nice things about people. Try to be there for people when they need it, and never take anyone's dignity away. And that's what makes a great person, because I know a lot of rich people who died in the last couple of years. Some of them weren't the best people, you know, they couldn't take it with them.
Sometimes people go to funerals like that to make sure the asshole's dead. I had a point to make. I like not take anybody's dignity away. I like what you said there. That's a good way to put it. And how people speak of you when you die, I'll not lie. I'm concerned about that. I got enough ego to hope that people say nice things to me after I'm gone. And I hope there's a lot of people who know who I am to say those things. Whether that happens or not, I don't know. I mean, it's happened to a small degree.
You've added me to
has
the
happened.
list. I'm on that list now, Tommy.
Well, good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Tell me about, you mentioned something about the warmth of the so-called Americana scene. I always think that word could be somewhat deceptive, especially when people have been playing rock and roll their whole lives, or even country music or whatever, and all of a sudden they're Americana. Someday that might not be the best assignation when we go abroad or play abroad, but that's their problem. However, There have also been some legends from regular music that now find a home in the Americana scene. And a lot of them are in Nashville. I mean, I know that Robert Plant made his little appearance at one point, not so much in Nashville, but playing with Buddy Miller and Jim Lauderdale's probably traversed both worlds of mainstream country and then playing in the root scene as is Buddy Miller. But how would you describe the kind of people, the kind of musicians and the wayward paths that have led there?
Everybody in the scene is burning to play music, or else their heads will explode. There's, if you think that you could be happy doing something else besides music in your life, if you think you could find somewhere in some avenue to feel fulfilled, by all means, go and do that. The music business is for people who have to make music or else they're going to go crazy. Those are the people that this town is built on, or part of this town is. And those people just live and breathe music. Sometimes when you're on stage and it's just going really good and you feel yourself levitating a little bit, and suddenly the music's playing you instead of you playing the music. Well, I know people in this town who live there. They're there all the time that way. And that's and you can learn to do that. It's not just something that's innate. You can learn how to play music well enough to levitate. It's a craft. It's a skill. It's not just something God given. Some people are more talented at it than others, sure, but talent is about 10% of the whole thing. The rest of it's persistence and practice and keeping your eyes and ears open to what makes an audience feel good about your music and what irritates them,
Are your peers
Although
Sorry, I was going to ask if the peers are complimentary, the people that you know, because everyone needs that vote of confidence sometimes, especially from some people that you admire. And I'm sure you've been in that.
Oh, yeah. You need that vote of confidence all the time, because I've met very few performers who were not insecure, who were not having a problem with depression. Almost all of them have that. And you need the vote of confidence from your friends and your fans and your comrades, colleagues and stuff. You need that vote of confidence just to keep you going. You need it from the audience most of all. And, in Nashville, for every packed house gig I play here, I got 10 gigs playing to 7 people in a coffee shop somewhere here, and then somewhere in the next town playing for 5 people, and that's so you're really jonesing for a vote of confidence all the time. You got to get it. It keeps you going. Every time I get a little fan mail in my email, I'll live on it like you live on a good dinner.
That's great. When you first were diagnosed, how long did you have to take time out, or were you pretty much writing and performing and throughout? Were you sidetracked at all? I know you were with the car accident, but how have the last few years been, especially with the COVID and the quarantine? And obviously you were probably kind of a basket case because, and though I don't know, but you already had a pre-existing condition going into this pandemic, and it was scary and people were dropping.
The pandemic obviously affected everybody. And I siphoned off a little my performing urge doing live stream concerts every week, But you can't see and hear the audience when you're doing that. It's a poor substitute. It's a way to make a little money,
Right.
sometimes better money than other times. But um, oh, I forgot what my point was. I remember. Uh, um, yeah, I lost about 6 months of road work after the car wreck, and then I lost about that same amount of time after the cancer first showed up, and I've had it twice since then. It's recurred on me twice, and but it wasn't as bad the second or third time. I was able to. The chemo only really hit me hard the first time. After that, it just, I might feel grungy for a day or two after I've had it, but other than that, it's not so bad. And I feel fine now. Cancer was more a nuisance than a disease for me. And um, I've resigned myself to the fact that it's probably going to come back because bladder cancer has a tendency to recur.
It's also very
And
treatable cancer.
it's totally treatable. Yeah, it's not it's not the worst kind of cancer you can get. And I would have been on the road hale and hearty and healthy in 2020 and 2021 if it weren't for the pandemic. Pandemic just devastated almost all performers live who survive on live gigs. Um, and I was curious, still am, about when we finally get to go out to clubs again and see music and meet your friends. I'm wondering, there's been a little gap where we were able to go out and see each other, but it wasn't long before the Delta variant happened. But I wonder how many friends of mine, colleagues of mine, uh, that I'm never going to see again when I go out to a bar because they moved back to Kansas or Virginia or Ohio or wherever they're from. You know, they couldn't make it happen in Nashville, what with the pandemic. So they've split. And I'm wondering what friends I have who aren't here anymore. You know, um,
The good thing about social media, that's one of the good things, is that you make it known because everyone's on that you're on tour and that you're going somewhere, and you've got recordings and you got interviews like this, so it's good.
yeah, yeah. You know, it's it's a double-edged sword. The good part is you're able to communicate with your fans on a pretty close basis, one-on-one almost. Uh, the problem would be, I have a rough few thousand real fans, not a huge audience, not a small one. But one of my fans is from Lithuania. About 50 of them are from England.
Wow.
About 3 of them are from Italy. You can't get them all together in a room. And there's not enough of each one of them to be able to tour where they are because financially you can't make it happen.
Mm-hmm.
But at least I can get in touch with them via the internet, and they can buy the record on iTunes or wherever if they can't come to see me. And a lot of them do come to see me. English people love Americana. It's quite a thing over there.
So do the Dutch and Japanese.
Yeah, the Dutch dig it. I didn't know about the Japanese. The French dig it a lot. The Germans dig it. Most of Europe digs Americana music. To them, we're exotic. I grew up around rednecks. There's nothing exotic about them at all to me. I grew up in a coal mining town, so I know what rednecks are. And there's nothing exotic to them, to me, at all. But in England, it's a totally different thing. They regard these people like demigods.
But
They
even
don't
so,
like they don't like the USA, but they love Americans over there.
I
It's kind of
remember
like
one of my favorite memories was I was going to school in London as a it was, you know, American students do their semester and their year abroad. So I found myself in London, really chasing the ghosts of music and musicians that just didn't exist anymore, at least in the early 90s, you know. Uh, but I remember it was right, the Gulf War had just started, and I saw the Blasters, not with Dave Alvin, but Phil and all these guys playing, and they launched into the song American Music. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but I remember Phil Alvin, the front man, very, a cartoon character, says, you know, in sincere, we hate nationalism, but we're gonna play this song anyway. And they ripped into it, and I felt like this is the kind of shit that makes me proud to be American. You know, it's Louisiana boogie and Delta blues and country swing, rockabilly, you know, and that's the best thing that we could that I could get behind in terms of national exports. And it's a good one, and it's an enduring one, don't you think?
we are one of the biggest exports of music. I mean, classical music 300 years ago was primarily European because we weren't really established as a country yet, but we invented the blues, rock and roll, Dixieland jazz, soul, and another thing, I'm a Southerner. I'm born and bred in the South, and people think we're all just idiots down here, which a lot of us are, but no more than anywhere else. We just sound like idiots when we talk. But all the music that I just mentioned, where did it come from? It came from the South. What kind of music came from Denver? I mean, yeah, there is California rock, soft rock, that happened, but it's based on something that was born here
Yeah.
or refined in England. England deserves as much credit for rock and roll as America does. Not so much country, but blues, rock and roll. They took what Muddy Waters started and Chuck Berry started and made something bigger out of it. The Stones, the
Oh, yeah.
Who.
Are you a Roger Miller fan?
Oh, I love Roger Miller. Yeah.
You kind of remind me of him. You have a very similar sense of humor and way of talking. I mean, he was from Oklahoma, but man, God, he's fantastic. I could never get tired of that. I don't even categorize it as country music, although it started there. He's like on a different planet.
Yeah. There was here's a funny one. This really happened. Roger Miller and Willie Nelson were drinking at a table with two other people at Tootsie's in the early 60s. None of them had made it big yet. I believe John Loudermilk, the songwriter, was also sitting at the table. There's 4 or 5 of them, and they were drinking beer. And the conversation, this was during the Cold War, and the conversation found its way to talking about fallout shelters. And so that happens, and it's getting to the end of the night, and they have to pay their tab. And everybody reaches in their pockets and pulls out whatever they have, and everybody, all the money they had in their pockets didn't add up to the tab. And so Roger Miller out of nowhere just says, well, it looks like we have a shell out falter. That is genius.
Yeah.
That is Roger Miller.
I read somewhere, he just said, yeah, I was in the Army, University of Korea, clash of 52.
See, what he did is what I dream of doing. John Prine was good at it too, skirting the line between serious songs and funny songs. Because if you write a funny song, you're teetering on the edge of becoming a novelty,
Sure.
like a Weird Al Yankovic or something. But to be able to write funny songs and serious songs, and sometimes both of them together in one song, that's a fine line to walk. And and I have to, that's the line I walk between funny and serious, or sometimes tragicomic, you know.
Are you happy with what I guess the 2021 Tommy Womack output is about? I know that's why we're here, but I liked what I heard very much, and I couldn't imagine you not loving it.
I like this new record a lot. Yeah. I we'll see how I feel about it in a year. I mean, it's great that I like the record, but in the long run, I'm not supposed to like it. It's for other listeners who will never hear the flaws in it that I hear. Cause they, I've heard Bob Dylan records and Rolling Stones records and Led Zeppelin records where there's deep, ugly flaws in them. And after listening to it for 30 years, I finally one day wake up and go, well, that's a mistake, isn't it? The fans can't tell most of the time. They have other reasons to either like you or dislike you.
Mhm.
But it's not because you made a mistake on a record. I can listen to this one pretty good from top to bottom. There's a few of my records that I can listen to that way, and there's a few that I can't. I used to not finish my songs before I recorded them. I'd have a great first verse, and I'd be so excited about it that I would very quickly write the second and third verse. And it would be only after I recorded and put the song out that I realized, oh, that third verse sucks, man. And that sucks, to know that it's already out of your hands. It's already there for the public to either embrace or reject. And I like this one a lot. I like the There I Said It record a lot. I like the Government Cheese anthology I put together. The last Government Cheese record, I like that. The Bis-Quits record, I like that one. I'm not that crazy about Stubborn or Circus Town. Washington, D.C., I like. Namaste, I like most of it. And I think I've named every record I've ever made right there.
What about, you wrote a book as well, correct?
3 of them.
See, as an author, is your writing muscle really, really strong while writing a book that has knocking off a song easier nowadays than it was when you were just starting out as a songwriter? And I ask that because I go through the same self-censoring, whether I'm writing something that's long form or if I'm writing like a 90-second song, for fun.
It's much easier to write songs now than it used to be. Not because I necessarily know the mechanics of it and I can just do it by, as a carpenter or something would put something together. It can, it's still heartfelt for me. But I don't sit down and say, okay, I'm going to write a love song today, or I'm going to write a song about dogs or about trucks or anything. Mm-hmm. I just, what I usually do first is I sit at the computer with a Microsoft Word blank doc up, and I just start typing. Whatever comes out, and then I'll set it to music. I'm not, I've played enough music that I'm fairly good at it now, but my God-given talent is writing. That's where I
And Steve,
really belong.
you're a raconteur.
Yeah, I am. I've been called that before. I'm not sure exactly all that it means, but I like how it sounds. I like the sound of the word.
It's good. Do you still? I always think in terms of man. I like if you're writing a melody in a verse and you're like, oh, I just completely did like a Shirelles melody or something. I think George Harrison did that for um, My Sweet Lord, which was essentially like he's so fine, do
Yeah, he
but
got in trouble for that one.
but everyone does that, and I'm wondering who that was nicked off of. I mean, there's all kinds of, there's a, the way a gospel thing is phrased, and then all of a sudden it ends up in like the midnight hour. So where is it possible to cheat, and where is it possible to like, all right, that sounds way too familiar? Because also sometimes you might not remember it and get really pissed because, oh my God, this was the best song I ever wrote, but I just wrote, a Lennon and McCartney tune.
Now I've ripped off melodies before, and knew I was doing it at the time I wrote the song because I thought, okay, I'm going to finish the song with this ripped off melody. I've ripped off Blowing in the Wind. I've ripped off John Prine's All the Best. The title track on I Thought I Was Fine was a total John Prine ripoff when I wrote it. And then I changed all the chords around and changed the tune, and it became its own thing. A Songwriter's Prayer off the There I Said It record. On the record, it goes, whisper the songs to me, oh Lord, cast them across my screen. But the tune I wrote it to was, whisper the songs to me, oh Lord, cast them across my screen. The answer, my friend, is blowing in the wind. So
God bless
I
you
do a lot
for thanks for taking the curtain away. Thank you so much.
That's how a lot of people write songs. Bob Dylan, he's ripped off tons of folks, especially his last few records. There's a couple of songs on recent records that are completely Robert Johnson songs. He just changed the lyrics to them. But that's blues, that's folk. You take things that have already been made and you change the words around and put your own stamp on it. And in blues and folk, that's not really considered plagiarism. It's considered passing it on to the next generation.
Yeah.
With rock and roll, it's a little different because obviously there's a lot of money to be made, or there used to be, in rock and roll and pop music. Mm-hmm. But there's been hundreds of thousands of rock and pop songs since the 40s or 50s up through the 90s, maybe, or maybe to the present day, but for all those hundreds of thousands of songs, or how many songs there are, there's only 12 notes. There's only 3 chords that usually count. There's only so many melodies. You're going to be stepping on somebody else's turf at one point or another. But the best way to get away from getting in trouble is just to be yourself. I could rip off songs, but the audience is concentrating mainly on how weird I am, and not that I just ripped off He's So Fine by the Shirelles or whatever.
Yeah. Hey man, this is liberating stuff for me to hear too. It's like, so I'm excited. I forgot who said the quote. I think it was Townes Van Zandt. Like they said, there's only 2 kinds of music. There's the blues and zippity doo dah.
That's right. That's right.
That's the best. But listen, I really, I love the record, the new one, and I was looking forward to. I'm glad we were able to kind of circle the wagons there. All right, we're going to do it today because we had a hard time getting. Part of it was my fault, so I apologize.
No, that's okay. Part of it was my fault, or whoever gave me the COVID, it was his fault.
You're like a Sherman tank, man.
Yeah, I get the feeling that God's keeping me around for some sort of purpose because back in my drinking and drugging days, I was brought back to life in an ambulance once. I went to jail once, and now I've been hit by a truck. I've had cancer 3 times. I had myriad drug and alcohol problems that I've managed one day at a time to get over, and I'm still here. I should be dead. I totally own up to that. I should be dead by now. And it's probably a good thing that I didn't make it big in my 20s because
You'd have
I
been
would
dead.
be dead. I'd have been dead within a couple of years. Yeah.
Gosh. Well, I'm glad you're not dead.
Well, I'm glad too. I'm glad you're not dead as well.
Right, man. No, this. I want to read. I haven't read your books, but I want to read a couple of them and then have you back. And because I love talking to authors. I'm an author as well, and I write, but I also have this obsession with music and all the other good things that keep the bank account low. But I have a 10-year-old, so I'm working a lot harder to make money lately. But it's
Yeah,
yeah,
I understand that.
but I'm thrilled to talk to you, and it's inspirational, and I'm glad you're plugging away, and so let's stay in touch.
Oh, please, let's do it. If you ever want to have me on the show again, just you know how to reach me.
Yeah, I'm going to be coming down to Nashville soon, so let's try to get a cup of coffee or a lunch or something like that on me.
Oh, come on. Yeah.
All right, bud.
I'll email you with my phone number.
Please do. All right, Tommy, have a great rest of the week and best to everybody. All right.
You too, Steve.
Take care, bud.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.